Good evening. My name is Jonathan Judakin. I'm the Spence L. Wilson Chair in the Humanities. I'm responsible for coordinating the Communities in Conversation series at Rhodes College. And I am so happy to welcome you to the last of our events this year, opening the Beale Street Symposium with this book launch and keynote lecture by Preston Lauterbach. Tonight is special. I'm not sure how many of you were aware when you walked in tonight that we are gathered here together this evening for a seance. We aim to conjure ghosts from the Memphis past, and our spirit medium is the inimitable Preston Lauterbach. Tonight is... Yeah, we've got to get the spirit moving, people. Tonight is special as well because I understand from Preston that he's made a special deal that all the students who are here tonight and who take an autographed copy of the book to their professors will get double extra credit. And that goes for all of you as well. You don't want to leave without Preston's book tonight because I know he doesn't have anything really prepared. That's not how you conjure ghosts. You have to anticipate a coming, and it requires something of an interaction. But whatever it is that he allows to come out of the bottle tonight is only going to be a little bit of these stories that he's got packed deep down inside. And in the pages of the book, in the nooks and crannies, down the alleyways that he is going to take you through this journey tonight, but more generally in the book, there are so many more of these stories, and they are our stories. They're the stories that all of us need to bottle up. We need to have on our shelves somewhere that we can go and access, that we can pull out, because they are the stories of what makes Memphis such an amazing place, such an extraordinary cultural crucible. Indeed, one of the most important crossroads in American civilization. Indeed, a crucial contributor to some of the most important things that have happened in world culture in the 20th century. That's what you're going to have bottled up. Now, a seance doesn't just work by accident. It takes people sitting around tables with focused intent to make happen what is going to start tonight and continue for the next 2 days. And I want to thank those folks who have held hands together and chanted together to help prepare this evening and the next few days. Let me begin, first of all, with thanking the remarkable team that works with me on the Communities in Conversation series, the unflappable Suhad Altayesh, who worked tirelessly over spring break to help spread the word and make arrangements because she just gets the job done when the job needs doing. And the dynamic Brianna Summers, who has out-tasked the old taskmaster that I thought I was all year long. And lastly, my administrative partner, Jackie Baker. It's a little secret, but this whole deal is really just a big, fabulous birthday celebration for Jackie Baker. Happy birthday, Jackie. After 8 years of doing this kind of programming in Memphis, it's made a huge difference to know that she's there to make sure that we all stay calm and clear. I'm grateful as well to the Rhodes Lecture Board, without whom the CIC series would not be possible. We're an extension of what they do on campus, and we appreciate their ongoing support. The Beale Street Symposium is made possible by the joint efforts of the Memphis Center, directed by Elizabeth Thomas, and the Mike Curb Institute for Music. Some of the folks sitting around the table scheming and dreaming this symposium included Tom McGowan, Tim Hubner, Chuck McKinney, Liz Daggett, Rin Abernathy, Walt Chapman, Shannon Hoffman, Amy Risley, and Suzanne Boniface. But the heavy lifter, the man without whom this all would not have happened, the kingpin, to use a favorite term of Preston's, is the director of the Curb Institute, John Bass, and he's going to come and introduce the Beale Street Symposium and Preston Lauterback. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, and please join me in thanking Jonathan Judakin as well for all of this. It's great to see all of you tonight. I'm the director of the Curb Institute and happy to be partnering with these other organizations and departments on campus to make this possible. The mission of the Curb Institute is research, preserve, and promote Memphis music, and there's going to be no better way to do that than programming like this. The Curb Institute works through programming. I've seen many of you at some of our shows. Original student research, some of our students are here. Community engagement, and some unique student experiences. While I have a captive audience, I'll tell you about one of the exciting ones we have. Through the Curb Foundation, we own a property on Audubon Drive, which was the first house Elvis purchased. We do all kinds of archival work here. And the most recent archival project we have is a show called An Evening at Elvis's. It's a joint interview and performance, and we just released the first show with Roseanne Cash. So you can go to eveningatelvis.org if you want to see it, or Facebook search for Evening at Elvis and check some of that out. But tonight's lecture, I'm really happy to be here. This is a labor of love to get this launched. And this launches the Beale Street Symposium, which I'll talk a little bit about. It's a 3-day look at Beale Street and its relationship to Memphis, past and present. Tomorrow, please join us in Hyde Hall, which is in the Catherine Borough Refectory, which is our cafeteria, for a series of presentations and discussions. At 12:30, Dr. Charles Hughes, a former Andrew W. Mellon postdoctoral fellow here at Rhodes and a professor at Oklahoma State, will give a talk titled From Beale Street to the World, Musicians in the Soul Revolution. You'll also get to buy his new book, Country Soul, Making Music and Making Race in the American South, at that talk. At 1:30, we'll hear presentations of Rhodes students working on projects related to Memphis and Beale Street. Topics will include Beale's place as a historical location and an entertainment district, and how these things are in conjunction and opposed at times. Using Ernest Withers' work as both an archival project and a source for creativity. And also using digital technology to better understand Beale's past, present, and future. There's an exciting app that some students have been working on, and they're going to announce that as well tomorrow. And then at 3 o'clock, there's a panel discussion featuring our very special guest, Calvin Newborn. Calvin is here. I think he's back. Come out and let us thank you for being here. Calvin is joining us here. He's, of course, a member of the first and arguably the most influential family of Memphis musicians. Through the Newborn family, really everything else radiates. And so it's so nice to have him in town with us, and he'll be a part of this panel discussion and doing some other things. So, Calvin, thank you for joining us in Memphis. Along with him on this panel will be Joyce Cobb, whom we all know and love. She's going to be sharing this. Legendary performer. She's also been teaching at Rhodes this year, which has been a wonderful experience for our students. She'll give perspective as a performer on Beale, and also as a club owner on Beale. And also Richard Cushing. I'm not sure if he's here right now. But Richard's been playing on Beale since 1987 and is also involved in many of the initiatives to honor the history of the street. So it's going to be a great recognition of and talk about the history of music on Beale and what it means today. Then tomorrow night at 7:30, there's a concert featuring Calvin Newborn, the Rhodes Jazz Band, and sort of a who's who of local jazz musicians as well. This is going to be at the Historical Daisy Theater, who's one of our partners on this. This is not the New Daisy. It's right across the street from the New Daisy. It's a wonderful space, and it's going to be a great setting for this. Tickets for that are going to be $10, $5 for students, and they'll be available at the door. Okay, so that's the Historical Daisy tomorrow at 7:30. And then Saturday at 4 o'clock, there's going to be a historical walking tour of Beale, led by Preston Lauterbach, with some additional guests. The cost of this is $20, and that cost covers entrance into the Withers Gallery and the Rock and Soul Museum, along with a snack at the Withers Gallery. So they can be purchased online at rhodes.edu/Beale Street Symposium, or Ren Abernathy, who's over here, who also none of this would have been possible without Ren. She'll be available after tonight's lecture if you'd like to register here. Tonight, though, we're honored to have Preston Lauterbach on campus to discuss his most recent book, Beale Street Dynasty, Sex, Song, and the Search for the Soul of Memphis. Lauterbach visited the college several years ago in the publication of his first book, The Chitlin Circuit and the Road to Rock and Roll, which you should also read if you haven't. And we're glad to have him back for the official release of his new book. It's available for purchase here before it goes on sale anywhere else, and we're excited about that. Early on in the discussions, it was important for Memphis to host the release of this particular book, and we're honored to do that tonight at Rhodes. Beale Street Dynasty, it's a riveting story about the history of Memphis and the epicenter on Beale Street. Spans from the tumultuous days of Reconstruction through the development of the church family and the street becoming a key location for development of popular music, black journalism, and entrepreneurship. It's a beautiful, sordid, and often troubling tale, but it's part of Memphis. And Lauterbach weaves this into a thoroughly compelling tale, which you'll get a sense of tonight. So the short of it is go buy the book. You'll be a smarter Memphian for it. The exciting part for Rhodes, though, goes beyond tonight's lecture and book release. Not only is Preston here tonight sharing his stories, but he's been serving as a Curb Visiting Scholar in the Arts for this academic year, a post that blues legend Bobby Rush held last year. So Preston is following in his footsteps there. Last semester, he worked intensely with 2 students on new research connecting the history of Beale to present day and exploring the relationship of the street to the city and vice versa. You'll be able to hear these presentations tomorrow at the symposium, but it's been a wonderful experience for all involved. So please join us tomorrow, Saturday, for the rest of the symposium, and come explore Beale Street with us. To begin our journey, though, please join me in welcoming Curb Visiting Scholar in the Arts, Preston Lauterbach.
Would it bother anybody if I use profanity? True, seriously, show of hands. I don't want to offend anybody. The thing, I would feel a lot more comfortable if I could swear. I would feel a lot better about being up here if I could really be myself. Because as Jonathan Judaikin noted in his introduction, I didn't prepare anything. I'm noted for my lack of preparation. So this is going to be, I worked long enough on the book. You know, I'm not going to lose a lot of sleep over the speech now. But this is going to be, you ever hear about President Franklin Roosevelt, his fireside chats, you know, over the radio back in the old days? I'm not going to say that anybody looks like they were there for that, but this is going to be barstool chat right here. It's just going to be, except that I'm going to do all the talking for like 45 minutes straight, which is quite unusual. If you really saw me in a bar, I would make an excuse to get out of there in like 10 minutes. But, you know, I'll share a couple of stories, tell a couple of lies, and then I want to hear what you guys think about it and answer your questions. So we will get to that as quickly as possible. So, you know, everybody here knows what Beale Street is today. Very successful tourist destination. The story that I'm focused on, the book that I wrote, is about its past life as the main street of Black America, which it was from the end of the Civil War all the way on up through the Civil Rights Movement. And its status as that is, as both Jonathan and John noted, is something for us to be very proud of, because it is something that changed the world. You know, I've been talking to people about this book around here, journalists and radio people, and we all have this shared understanding, and I used to live here for a while, so I know the vibe. We all have this kind of shared understanding that history is a burden around here. You know, things happen in the past that not everybody is so proud of and so happy about having happened here. We're not going to worry about that tonight. Beale Street is something to cherish. It is something that I hope that this history can be embraced in this resurgence that the city is experiencing right now, because it is the soul of Memphis. It is what made Memphis exceptional. You don't see me spending years of my life writing a book about Cincinnati, do you? Stuff happened here. This place is crucial to our story as Americans. So I'll touch on a few of the characters that I think were key. The Beale Street Dynasty really was made up of several components, but it was built around one man, Robert Church. So you know him. He's a civic icon. He's the South's first black millionaire. But he's also a lot more than that. He is a rugged, unique individual. And as much as Beale Street began when it was laid out and it was put on the map, it really started one day in 1866. There was a riot going on in the city. And Robert Church had a target on his back. And you guys are going to be shocked to hear this, but the police were after African-American people during this riot. I told you, history can get a little mucky sometimes. And last week can too. But Church was already a leadership figure. He had already taken the struggle for civil rights on himself, and when this riot broke out, the police went after him. So, okay, in classic Barstool fashion, I'm going to say some crazy shit happened to Robert Church. He was in his saloon, which was up there on the corner of Gayoso and 4th Street. I think there's a tattoo parlor there right now. But it was right at that corner. That corner still exists. The police bust in there. And Church has got barrels of whiskey, and he's got cigars, you know, and he's got his cash till, got a billiard table. They go in there, they turn the billiard table over. And they drink off all of his whiskey. And they smoke his cigars. And they take all of his cash, and they shoot him in the head, and they leave him for dead. How about that? So he's laying there bleeding. His whiskey is running all over him. And nobody knew if he was going to survive. That wasn't the plan. But I believe it was right then and there that this man who was born a slave resolved that he was going to do something. And he spent the rest of his life standing up. And it really began on Beale Street. So I say that the dynasty, his Beale Street dynasty, was really a civilization because there was so much to it. You know, there were regular legitimate businesses. But Mr. Church really built his fortune one street over from Beale Street on Gayoso. Does anybody know what was going on Gayoso Avenue? Yeah, everybody knows what's going on Gayoso Avenue. Let me back up a little bit and touch on Church's personal history. If you've ever seen a picture of Church, he doesn't look any more African than I do. He's a very light-looking guy. His father was a white man. His father was his master, was a prominent steamboat line owner and property owner in the city. Unusually, he and his father were pretty tight. You know, the old man kind of looked after him and helped him out and opened some doors for him. But there's another side to that, and that is his mother, who was enslaved. Was she Captain Church's sex slave? She bore him children. She belonged to him. And we love our mothers, don't we? I got to think that this bothered Robert Church a little bit, this arrangement. Not only was he enslaved, but his mother was enslaved. And so the foundation of Church's dynasty, this magnificent civilization, were a bunch of whorehouses where white women worked and made the money for Robert Church. That is, when you write a book, you try and think about all the things that people want to read about. And it's just sex, 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 and sex. So I wanted to make sure that we got that somewhere in the title. It's not quite prominent enough on that front cover. That is where the sex in the story is, on Gayoso Avenue. And the sex on Gayoso Avenue helped to underwrite this incredible African-American civilization 1 block over on Beale Street. So imagine that. You got 2 blocks side by side. Gayoso with the brothels and the white prostitutes, and Beale Street with everything that we know happened there. Now, after that riot, there was another trauma that came along pretty quickly in Memphis, the yellow fever, which was, there were 2 things that made Memphis really unique during this era that I think laid the groundwork for what a special place this was. 1, the black vote. Everywhere else in the South, the black vote was, certainly after Reconstruction, was taken away, was denied. There was no black political power virtually anywhere in the entire South. Here, it remained constant. The other thing was the yellow fever, which destroyed a lot of the city and the population. People fled, but it really changed the character of the city. And African Americans really, in some people's view, saved the city during that time. They formed militias that protected people's property, that delivered the medicine and the food and the aid, helped the city get back on its feet again. That's also where the legend of Robert Church began, because part of his cover for running the underworld the way that he did was excellent PR. I mean, it's not like he just represented himself as this flesh baron, right? He represented himself as a community leader, so you got to be very suspicious of these people out here. Which I'm sure you already are. But this is what he did in order to gain the loyalty and the trust of the citizenship. While a lot of people believed during this fever that Memphis was just going to be abandoned and cease to exist, if you can imagine that. This is what a turning point the fever was and how important Church was in rebuilding the city. So the legend of Robert Church is that the city was trying, or what was left of the city was trying to raise some funds in order to rebuild and repopulate and get back, kind of like New Orleans after Katrina, right? It's a movement similar to that. And the legend goes that Robert Church was the very first investor in these recovery bonds, which were issued in order to get people spending money on redeveloping the city. And he supposedly gave $1,000 and bought recovery bond number 1. He was a master at these kind of goodwill gestures. It was just enough to establish himself as a leader, as a legitimate force for goodness, and frankly to make white people feel guilty about not doing more. So the legend goes that after he bought that first bond, everybody else lined up because they didn't want this black guy being the only one who would put his money where his mouth was. So during that time, it was an unbelievable renaissance that followed the fever. And 2 of the characters that came to prominence during that time, one was a fellow by the name of Pappy Haddon. Y'all ever heard of Pappy Haddon? He was what was the president of Memphis. So he was, the mayoral office was done away with, that whole governmental structure was changed. He was in charge of everything. And he took it on himself to rebuild the streets and the sewer system and the water system and all that kind of stuff. And was trying to, divine sources of income in order to do this. And prostitution had already been essentially legal in the city, but under Pappy Haddon, it reached a whole new level. I'll tell you a funny thing. He had, so he was not an attorney, he had no legal training, but that didn't prevent him from becoming the judge in police court. So he held court every single day. Every criminal had to cross his altar there. And some of the testimony from these trials is amazing. One day, these two prostitutes were riding their horses naked through the street and got picked up by the police and brought before Judge Haddon. And he was very sympathetic. He said, you girls clearly don't know our rules around here, so I'll explain them to you. He said, you got to stay in the house, meaning the whorehouse, during the daytime, or at nighttime. He said, you can go riding in the daytime, but don't bring any attention to yourself that you're different from other ladies. So in other words, he didn't want them standing out. And he said, but since what did he say? Oh, he said, since that you defied these rules, you have to divide the wages of sin with the city. That was essentially his program for recovering Memphis post-yellow fever, divide the wages of sin with the city. I thought about calling the book that for a while, but it wasn't quite specific enough. Another figure of great importance who came to the city during that time, whose life was changed by the fever, was Ida B. Wells, a great journalist, born in Holly Springs, Mississippi, lost her parents in the fever and was put in charge of a number of siblings who were younger, I believe an aunt, there was a whole bunch of them. So they came to Memphis to start their life over. She was just a young lady when she got here. My goodness, I mean, she is tough. She had to take care of her family from the age of 18 on. And, you know, I knew about her. You know, I majored in history in college. I'd heard her name. I was familiar generally with her as the great anti-lynching crusader of the NAACP era. I came here and I saw her name around. And I realized she was associated with the place in one way or another, but really didn't know exactly what part Memphis played in her life. So you can stop that anytime you want. Just go ahead and answer it. Tell them to come on over. It's no problem. We're friends. It's casual. This is just, that happens at Barstool History Night, you know? People's phones go off. So the thing that Ida B. Wells plugged into in Memphis, another extraordinary thing about the city, was that it had this thriving print journalism culture. Look at her. Early 1880s. She's, you know, in her early 20s. She's African American. She's a female. Those are two categories of human being that were not encouraged to be outspoken in the 1880s. And yet she found an environment here on Beale Street that really allowed her not only to speak her mind, but to develop a totally unique and important message. This was, and to get back to Haddon a little bit, another thing that was really interesting about him, by the time Ida B. Wells came to the city, what she saw was Judge Haddon's city, which was, okay, prostitutes running wild and free, but also African-American city council person, African-American county attorneys, African-American wharf master, African-American Republican political leader who helped to organize the public officials. So it was amazing what was going on here. I mean, it was complete. It was like I call this the alternate universe era of Memphis history because it was so unlike everything else that was happening in the South. But it was attributable to the fever. It was attributable to some of the white attitudes toward black leadership and the reality that black voters were vital and outnumbered whites, you know, very, very seriously. So that was the world that Ida B. Wells stepped into. Now, she came into this scene, what she said was this. She said, "It was through journalism that I found the real me." And journalism on Beale Street meant publishing for a couple of the African-American papers that went out of, one out of First Baptist Church. These were Baptist papers, but they circulated, and then the articles circulated around the country. So her articles were getting picked up in black papers in Washington and Cleveland and Boston, Philly, other cities, and she was making this name for herself. And she started to use her platform, I think, to encourage people to save their money, to not drink so much liquor, to not gamble so much. She didn't win that fight. It still continues today, but she tried. She, more importantly, I think, she, as I said, she honed her voice. And one of the things that she did was that she started to needle people like Robert Church. In her column, she once asked, what benefit is a leader to his people if he doesn't use his wealth and his power to elevate their status, to alleviate their misery and their poverty? And this got Church thinking. He, up to that point, you know, had been a street brawler and a saloon boss, and as I said, he had his charms as well. But he had yet to really devote a lot of his energy to humanitarian causes. But Ida B. Wells got through to him. So much so that when she left with her family to California in 1886, she got out there and I think she really regretted it. She wanted to do what was right by staying with her family and trying to take care of them, but she took herself off of the front lines, and she wanted to get back here. And she didn't know how to do it. She wasn't making enough money at her teaching job in California, and she didn't have a whole lot of wealth to fall back on. She had heard about this millionaire, supposedly, and so she wrote him a letter. And she explained who she was and what she was doing and asked for a $100 loan. So he sent it to her. And that was a major turning point in her career. She came back to Memphis in the late 1880s and really started her social criticism, if you will. She became an intense crusader against lynching, but she had a little streak to her too. She, you know, a lot of the lynchings that happened in the Deep South in Mississippi and Alabama were done for sexual reasons, because the perpetrators of the lynching accused the victims of raping white women. Sometimes it wouldn't even take a full assault. It might just take looking at one the wrong way. But you know what she said? She said, nobody around here really believes that threadbare lie about Negro men assaulting white women. And you understand what her implication was? Her implication was that it was voluntary relationships. And she said that if white men don't watch it, there's going to be some truth revealed about their women that won't sit well with them. So at that point, she was run out of town. She moved to Chicago a couple days after that published. No, she really did. She wrote those lines at the corner of Beale and Hernando in her office, and was on a train to Philadelphia when that news hit. And her newspaper office was either closed down or broken up, one or the other. But either way, she had made her mark on Memphis and moved on. One more of the, you know, it's so interesting to me to hear how people react to this story, and how, as I said, history can be such a burden here because of the King assassination, but that I think that there are some redeeming stories in the Beale Street saga. Another one that really, I mean, just knocked me off of my feet in doing the research and compiling the story was that of Robert Church, Jr. So it wasn't just Sr. who was the kingpin or the boss of Beale Street. Church Jr. took up that mantle when his father passed away in 1912 and became the leading politician in all of America in terms of African-American leaders. He put together, so, you know, lately we've been celebrating the anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, right? 50 years since that piece of legislation. Well, 50 years before that, people don't know this is totally forgotten. 50 years before that, Robert Church Jr., from his offices on Beale Street, started the first mass registration campaign of African-American voters called the Lincoln League. Started that in 1916. Built that up to a position of great influence in the Republican Party, which was the party of African-American affiliation at that time. Please don't make me go into it. Just take my word for it. It's different now. But, well, do we have any black Republicans in the House tonight? I didn't think so. But he organized his voters not only as a local outfit, but expanded out into the state and was called on by the party to organize black voter registration drives in Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky, Maryland. He was all over the place, traveled totally on his own dime, and did these things, again, with a goal of ultimately elevating black political power in the best way that he knew how. There was one slight problem, which was a man known as Boss Crump. So Church, Republican, African-American, Crump, Democrat, white man from Mississippi. You know what though, strange piece of trivia real quick. Robert Church Sr., Ida B. Wells, E.H. Crump, all hailed from Holly Springs, Mississippi. Now, if somebody wants to do some research, I'd like to see the results of that. But that wasn't really what I was focused on, so I don't know. But that's just almost beyond coincidental. It's crazy. Some people say Memphis is a small town. It's a bunch of small towns. But Crump and Church Jr., though they had plenty of reasons to oppose each other, instead formed an alliance. And this, to me, started, I think, the second great era of hope, possibility, progress, and, as I said earlier, an alternate universe, what was going on in Memphis with regard to race issues compared to the rest of the South, because nowhere else was there a federally powerful African-American leader who was working in conjunction with the white political boss. Debating how much of this story I should give away and how much I should... I think I'm already lubricated. Well, I think their alliance was truly a remarkable thing. And as long as the Republican Party was in power, Church had a good thing going. This is another strange twist. When President Roosevelt, who's looked at as a civil rights icon, took office, it was a bad day for African-American Republicans. That was a rough time. It was a very good time for Mr. Crump. But just as the Church-Crump alliance was this, I mean, remarkable decades ahead of its time, their falling out was every bit as dramatic and as, I think, as damaging as their partnership had great potential, but that potential ultimately crushed beneath some incredible issues, which I think you should probably read about in the book. But I mean, it is, you know, as I said, it's something I think to embrace, something I think to feel good about. You have a tremendous sense of place, a tremendous story here. I mean, it is Cain and Abel, it's Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker. It is, I mean, the ultimate in human drama. You know, there is nobody has the market cornered on good. Nobody is completely evil, just like Mr. Church isn't exactly black and he isn't exactly white. You have a complex group of characters and a seriously complex and dramatic story. And in closing, I think I want to say it reminds me of something that Robert Penn Warren, the great novelist, wrote in his book about a Southern political machine called All the King's Men, which is, us students of history know that there is no good in man. There is no bad in man. There is good and bad in man, and the devil takes the hindmost. All right. So the Q&A is always the best part. Really, I should probably say some thank yous first. So thank you, John Bass. Thank you, Jonathan Judakin, Elizabeth Thomas, Rin Abernathy. If anybody wants to take bows, now's your time. Question?
Where did it all go wrong?
You know, it's complex. I mean, these were politicians. So while they're building their alliances, they're also always searching for weaknesses and trying to wield power against one another. The Crump Machine was an intricate and ingeniously constructed political entity. The crazy thing to me is Church Jr. had a chance to destroy the Crump Machine. Instead, he partnered with it. Was he too optimistic? I mean, everybody can judge from the safety of hindsight, knowing how things turned out. Maybe he was hopeful that they really could do something special in partnership that couldn't be done separately. Maybe he believed in, I kind of doubt that, but maybe he really believed in, the ability to forge this partnership among strange bedfellows. But it was, it was tied up in politics and the struggle for power, the struggle for the soul of this city. I mean, it was, that's what it ultimately came down to. Hang on just a second. I got one back here. Yes, sir.
I noticed that you crafted a very limited narrative about the beginning of your program. Are you familiar with the Memphis Massacre?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
The riot you're talking about of 1866?
1865 and 1866.
Yes, sir.
And I noticed you moved from 1866 to 1886.
Yes.
And I'm just perplexed by the fact that you didn't talk about that Memphis in 1865 and 1866, that there was maybe 27,000 people living in the city.
Yeah.
17,000 of those was black.
Yeah.
And blacks owned most of the businesses in Memphis at that time until the riot and the different things like that started.
Yeah.
And then it was moved. See, people don't realize and understand why there's so many blacks that was living in Mississippi, because they would take people from the city of Memphis and move them to Mississippi. So I can understand Ida B. Wells, 20 years later, moving back to Memphis, trying to recover some of the losses that her grandparents or some of her people, had lost during the 1865 and 1866 riot.
Yeah.
And also, did you talk about the unions? The unions was here at that time also.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all in the book. For the talk, like I said, it's just kind of barroom chatter. I wanted to hit on the characters, some of the colorful stories, but that's all in there. It opens with the complete insanity that was the Memphis riot of 1866, where I'll tell you, 46 African-American lives were lost, at least that's the number that was tallied. 2 white casualties on the other side, which were probably due to friendly fire. So the riot, for the most part, took place between the African-American soldiers of the Union Army, who were stationed at Fort Pickering, which is down there kind of by the Ornamental Metal Museum. On the other side, you had the police force, and I mentioned that briefly. A lot of them were Confederate veterans. These sides had just fought a war against each other. They were both armed and patrolling the streets, and they didn't like each other. And the police force particularly drank too much. And one day, let's see, I believe it was the last day of April, at the corner of, it's now G.E. Patterson and 3rd, there used to be a bridge because the bayou was open there. And the story goes that they got in a fight, some of the soldiers and the policemen. And that provoked a 3-day orgy of blood and fire and rape, in which he says 1865 and 66. So slavery had just ended. People came to the city, African Americans came to the city to try and build a new life. They built schools, they built churches, they built businesses. And the rioters knew where these places were and put the torch to them. And a lot of these were in that Fort Pickering neighborhood near the fort. I think people built, I guess, where they felt like they were going to be protected. Well, listen to what happened. The Union commander of the fort there had the power and the ability and the might to stop that riot. As I said, it went on for 3 days. He let it go. He let it go. He sacrificed the black citizens and the black soldiers who were killed, and the black property that was lost for political reasons. He was concerned that if the South got to be too peaceful and could take care of itself without federal intervention, that he'd be out of a job. It was a very serious debate that was going on at that time with the military downsizing. So yeah, all that's in there. I don't want you to think that I glossed that over.
I just want people to realize and understand that at one point that Memphis itself had quite a few minority businesses. In fact, they controlled the whole downtown area. And I think that is important. I think that is very important. And the last I want to say is my grandfather always said that if the tiger don't get a chance to tell his story, the hunter will.
Tony. It was. Microphone.
I was going to ask the question about...
You know, can I introduce you real quick?
Go ahead.
Okay, stand up. Come on. So this fellow right here, Tony Steinberg, buddy of mine, is the descendant of two legendary Beale Street families. The very first property owner of color on the street, Joe Clouston, and also the Steinberg family. So anybody who's ever heard of, you know, Booker T and the MGs, familiar with his family. Continue.
I was going to ask the question about the troops being required to stand down, because had they not been told to stand down, then the outcome might have been different in the 1866 riots, but you basically already covered it.
Yep. Yep. No, it was an incredible, like I said, a politically motivated maneuver. So after 3 days, then the commander of the fort said, yeah, we better put a stop to this. And let it happen, as I said. Anybody else? Ma'am.
You say something about the church women?
Oh my gosh, yeah, they're remarkable, remarkable. So Robert Church Sr. Had a daughter, well, he had two daughters, but he had one that was particularly distinguished, the name of Mary Church, last name Terrell, after she married, moved to Washington, D.C., and became, my goodness, I mean, her resume is just remarkable. Along with Ida B. Wells, one of the first, or one of the only two females of color to be involved with the inception of the NAACP. She was the first African American on the school board in Washington, D.C. She lived to be 90. I mean, she was born during the Civil War, died in 1954. If you can imagine that, somebody who lived from the Memphis riot to when Elvis first recorded. I mean, that's a lot of water under that particular bridge, but I mean, she was out picketing segregated lunch counters in DC in her 90s with her little spectacles. I mean, she had that church bulldog intensity about her. Robert Church Jr.'s daughter, Roberta, earlier I asked if there were any black Republicans here, and there weren't, because she was the last one. But she followed in her father's footsteps in politics, and this is in the book a little bit, but her father, Robert Church Jr., died in 1952, right before Eisenhower won the presidency, and there was a brief Republican ascension. She took over his political organization and then became the first black female elected to whatever they are, Shelby County Republican delegation, something along those lines. But yeah, she was a staunch character too. All of those church people, they were very tough. You know, when your father or grandfather can live through 2 bullet wounds to the head, that's tough. Sir?
A mundane question. How did you happen to latch on to this subject, topic, and get started researching it, and ultimately write the book?
Yeah, well, you know, it happened little by little. I'm an archive rat. You know, you hear of gym rats who spend all their time working on their jump shot in at the basketball court. I'm that in the archives. I'm always looking for mysteries and things to investigate. So after I moved here, I'm not from here, but married into Memphis, moved here about 10 years ago. I was primed, you know, to be interested. I liked the music and the culture and started to meet the people. I wish Emerson Abel was here right now. But I got into Beale Street history that way, through listening to some of the elder musicians talk about it first. Somewhere picked up that Robert Church had been prominent, didn't know the details, thought it was worth looking into, and very quickly found, you know, some intriguing little tidbits of information, not just about being the South's first black millionaire, but, you know, the whorehouses. So it's the little things that keep an archive rat going. Okay, ma'am.
Hi, I just wanted to ask one question. Do you see the history of prostitution that you discuss in your book as connected to the sex trafficking that's happening in places like South Memphis today?
I love that question. I love that question. You know, it's hard to say that for me to say that there's a direct connection, because I don't know. Other than it's considered the world's oldest profession for some reason. And, you know, regardless of the laws and the customs and the morals of the people, it continues everywhere. I don't know if it's any more a part of Memphis culture than it is part of, you know, San Diego culture, where I grew up. There were prostitutes. Richmond, Virginia culture, where I was born, prostitutes. Yeah, they're pretty much everywhere throughout history. Yeah, hard to get away from. I wish there was a better answer, but I like that question. I was in Professor Judekin's class yesterday. One of my favorite questions that I heard was, well, do you think that Robert Church Sr.'s dynasty helped to inspire or in some way fertilize the crime of, the culture of crime that is going on in the city today? I thought it was a brilliant question. I have no idea what the answer is, but it's a great, you know, creative way to think about it. I mean, is that why things are the way they are? I don't know. It's tough. Ma'am.
Can you comment on the political and historical influences of original music in Memphis?
So you want the W.C. Handy
What was the
genesis?
Political and historical influences on original Memphis music.
Well, you know, everything is intertwined. Sex, song, the struggle for the soul of Memphis. You can't have one without the other. And that's best embodied in the story of W.C. Handy, who is known somewhat controversially as the father of the blues. He came here as a band leader in 1905, 1906. He was a trained musician, but he loved the folk music. He loved the street preachers and the people out there, you know, blowing harmonica, and was really drawn to that type of sound, even though he was a learned musician. There's tension in music between the learned musician and the more improvised kind, the self-taught. But Handy was in both of those worlds. So when he came to Memphis, he was already attuned to what was going on musically in some of the low-down places, the saloons and that type of thing. So that's what he did. He hung around the saloons. He listened to the piano players. He more or less what you'd probably recognize today as sampling. He sampled. He heard a snatch of piano being played in a saloon. He liked the way it sounded. He grafted it onto another idea that he'd picked up somewhere else, an unusual composition format that he heard strictly from folk, you know, from working people singing on the riverboat landings. And it was the, you know, the 4-bar or 16-bar, I'm not a musicologist, it was the blues, basically. But it had yet to be, you know, recorded, identified, written down until Handy put it all together. So that was him. Now, how did he get to be this father of the blues? How is he recognized as being the founder of this particular genre? It is completely intertwined with the rise of Boss Crump. Is that what you mean by the political background of it? So there was some of the historical. The political is, first time Mr. Crump ran for mayor. I see you over there, I'll get you next. First time Mr. Crump ran for mayor. So this is kind of interesting, this is sort of deep. Political power in those days ran through the saloons. All the guys who ran, so let's say Jim Spake ran a saloon. Jim, what would your saloon be called? Jim's Place. I'm gonna call it the Golden Saxophone because I like that better. So, all right, Jim's an entrepreneur, and let's say, well, I need another volunteer back here somewhere. Who's gonna run for mayor? Let's say Kobe Smith's running for mayor. So he knows that if Kobe Smith wins the mayoral race, if he helps Kobe, then Kobe's going to let him do whatever he wants to at his saloon. And so in exchange for that protection, Jim then had to package all the votes for Kobe's election. Do y'all follow all of that? So that was the way that worked. All of the saloonocrats were political organizers. They got the votes together, they bundled them up, voted them for a particular candidate. If the candidate won, anything went in that saloon. Handy actually worked at a place called, well, not called Jim's Place, but it could have been, because it was run by a guy named Jim Mulcahy. It was really called Blue Heaven. And so Jim Mulcahy was a Crump supporter in this election and was familiar with Handy, because Handy used to play in the Blue Heaven, in Jim's Place. And said, well, why don't you come and play for these campaign rallies, for the Crump ticket? And so Handy did it. And Handy decided on his own, I believe, to compose a new campaign tune. Excuse me. And the title of that song was initially Mr. Crump. Mr. Crump don't like it. It went on and on about all the things Mr. Crump didn't like, which truthfully he loved, by the way. I mean, he built the Crump Machine on all the things he supposedly didn't like, but that was politics then and it is now, I think. But you know, that upswing of politics and history, it all culminated with Handy and Crump. Mr. Crump became the Memphis Blues, published as sheet music, and it helped to start the blues craze and really initiate blues as popular music. And if you think about it, I see Chris Harrington back there. I'm stealing this idea from him. Blues is the foundation for all popular music, from rhythm and blues, rock and roll, soul, all the way up to disco. So W.C. Handy, in that 1909 Crump election, working for that low-down Jim, whether he was Spake or Mulcahy or whatever, changed the course of American popular music and made it what it is, what we recognize it as today. Hang on, you already got one, and I saw this gentleman back here.
See if this works. I think this is a great opportunity for people to learn about Memphis, and I'm going to read your book. I'm from North Memphis, Tennessee. I don't know if that means anything to you, but if you grew up in Memphis, there's North Memphis, and then there's South Memphis, if you're black. And but anyway, you mentioned music, and you mentioned Mr. Abel. My question really was specifically about the high schools, because in Memphis, you know, if you grew up in North Memphis, where I grew up, my parents went to Humes, and we had some great people come out of Humes. Everybody knows them. You know, Isaac Hayes is one of them. But there's a guy called, I think it's Unzi Horn.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people that come out of South Memphis. I didn't go there much. But there's another school, Booker T. Washington. So did you talk about the influence of the high schools? You know, back in the old days, high schools were like the center of the neighborhood. Did you talk about any of that stuff in your book?
You know, I didn't do it as much in this book, but I did it in a book that I wrote a few years ago, published, called The Chitlin Circuit. So that focused a lot more on the importance of the band directors to that whole class of professional musicians in Memphis. Where'd you go to school, Calvin Newborn? Yeah? Well, your father, was your father your teacher, or did you learn in school?
No, my father was musically illiterate.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But he,
Didn't stop him.
he made sure that his sons weren't early on. You know, he knew that he was limited and he didn't want us to be limited. But at Booker Washington, when I went to Booker T in high school, we only had, there was only one bandmaster at both black schools, high schools, and that was Professor W.T. McDaniel.
Yeah.
And Professor McDaniel knew my dad, and he knew our talents. So Professor McDaniel taught at Manassas and Booker T. Washington. He taught at both schools. He came from Mississippi, but he taught at both schools, and my brother and I played with both swing bands, the Manassas Rhythm Bombers and the Booker Teasers. Because Professor McDaniel knew our capabilities. In fact, he let us play any instrument that we wanted to play. My brother A lot of people don't know this. My brother could play any instrument he wanted to.
Hey, tell us
He
again.
wasn't only the world's best jazz pianist, he was the world's greatest musician all around, bar none. And I'm not saying this because he ain't heavy, he's my brother. Phineas Newborn Lajette Newborn Jr. was the world's greatest jazz pianist and the world's greatest musician that ever lived, as quiet as it's kept. In fact, I wrote a book with that title about him, As Quiet as It's Kept, The Genius of Phineas Newborn Jr. I would like to invite everybody to come over to the old Daisy. I'm going to play some of his music. He was quite a composer, an arranger. As a matter of fact, I would say that he was the one, if he gets the right, if I can get some support, we will put Memphis on the map again, since Elvis Presley put it on the map 50 years ago. The Newborn Dynasty.
There you go. I wanted to add something to your question. So one of the great band leaders, one of my favorite figures in Memphis history, he reminds me of him a little bit, Jimmy Lunsford from Manassas High School. He makes a brief appearance in this book. This is a crazy story. So this was a 1927 mayoral election. It was the height of the two powers, the two great powers, the church machine and the Crump Machine. They got together to win a mayoral election. Church had voting schools set up all over black neighborhoods throughout the city. Remarkable. The eve before the election, election eve, night before the election, Lunsford's band was playing at the Palace Theater. It was swinging. They played it out, they broadcast on the radio, so it's spilling out of people's windows. I mean, it just filled the streets. It was a beautiful scene. It was such an upbeat moment. The voting school, the church voting school, was over at the corner of Beale and Hernando near the Palace Theater. The place was packed. People were learning how to cast their ballots, learning about the candidates, learning how to vote. And at about 8 o'clock at night, when that place was full, bomb went off in the place. And nobody was injured, but right at that moment, the candidate who was opposing the Crump Church candidate was accusing church of the most dastardly deeds ever seen in Memphis politics. So it's, like I said, incredible intertwined stories. Lunsford, voting, explosions, just another night on Beale Street, Sir.
But Beale Street was actually the only place that the white majority of Memphis would allow anybody who wasn't white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. That's why a lot of the immigrants who came, I guess, before and after World War II ended up with their businesses like Schwab. Even though
Schwab was there in the 1870s.
Yeah, but being Jewish owned, it wasn't allowed on Main Street.
Well, Beale Street was international. I mean, there was a strong Italian presence. One guy I read a lot of interviews with who was real colorful said, let's see, the Greeks had the cafes, the Italians had the vice, the Jews had the stores, and the Negroes were the customers. That's how it was done. But it was a little bit more mixed than that. But there was a strong Italian component, very strong Irish presence, very strong German presence. I'll tell you another weird one. One of the first band leaders who was located on Beale Street right after the Civil War was not African American. He was a white guy, last name of Arnold, who had already gained fame as the man who, he didn't compose Dixie, but he was supposed to be the first one to write the notes, do the notation for Dixie, which then became the Confederate national anthem. So this just shows you how people can transform. He's writing the Confederate national anthem one year, and then the next he's teaching black people how to play music on the street after that. But yeah, Beale Street was international. And, you know, I think it was probably appealing to the African-American clientele to not deal with ex-Confederates, so it worked in that regard. But yeah, Beale Street had a lot of different influences. I don't know necessarily so much about the white power structure only allowing that. I mean, I think it happened fairly naturally. Ma'am.
Hi. Thank you for your book and for presenting this history. I definitely intend to purchase the book, but I wanted to just make mention of a local historian and musician whose birthday we are remembering today. And we lost him a few months ago. His name is Ellis Spada Matthews. He is a blues musician and the husband of my sister Carolyn here. And we really wanted to be here to honor him and his legacy as well, because he was also a politician locally.
Oh, wow.
He actually once ran for mayor of Memphis, African American. And he is responsible for the last hit that Stax created.
What's the title of that?
Feel like breaking up somebody's heart.
Oh, okay, yeah, we all know that one. That's
So
a great
today
one.
is his birthday, and I just wanted to make mention of that. Thank you for your book and your work. I feel that his presence is really here
We said
today.
it was a seance, so he's welcome. Thank you. All right, I think that'll do it. Oh, we got one more.
Yes.
Last one, and then, oh, we got two more. You already had too many, stop. Ma'am. Yeah, that's tough, you know. Yeah, that's an important question. So she's asking, how did Beale Street go from being the main street of black America to this tourist destination? Is that basically it? Exactly, yeah. So, you know, it's, you'd classify that as urban renewal, which was a huge program that took place in the 1960s and 70s. That a lot of the money and the energy in urban renewal went to destroying black neighborhoods, Beale Street included. You know, there's a little bit of the street left, originally intact as it was, but all the side streets, you know, were full of residential areas. I mean, it was a densely urban area, unlike what you see when you're down there now. Honestly, books could be written about that, but I mean, that is the gist of it. It took place in the 60s and 70s. There was a bit of a push-pull because desegregation took place during that time, and a lot of the old-time black business owners down there who I didn't know, but I read interviews with, said, you know, that was the worst thing that happened to us. I mean, it was the best thing and it was the worst thing. So, yeah, I mean, in the name of progress, some bad stuff has happened and some history has been lost. Yeah, one more over there. Sir.
Yes, I was told that this is the last question, but I actually bought the book. I haven't read it, obviously, but I wanted to know if there's a section there about the other businesses, like the 4 black medical schools that were on Beale Street, the Martin brothers.
Oh yeah, they're in there.
Okay, and the old Red Sox and the stadium and so on. But certainly at one time, Beale was known as a medical district that trained quite a number of black doctors who went all over the country, and I think that's a very important part that needs to be known.
No, I didn't know that.
Yes,
I'm familiar with some of the, you know, Dr. Venson, dentist, you know, and I'm
As a
familiar
matter
with
of fact,
him.
2 of the Martins were doctors, 2 were pharmacists, and the Terrell Hospital was down there, and the Martins actually started a med school. There were, at one point in time, 4 medical schools before the Flexner report came out and started closing down.
Yeah,
small
interesting.
medical schools.
Interesting. Yeah, J.B. Martin was an ally of Church in his political organization, Church Junior, and he plays a prominent part in the conclusion, which I promised not to spoil. So he's in there, and some of the business people are in there here and there too, but I didn't realize that about medical training. So thank you guys, this has been wonderful.